And we're back. Welcome back to the Closing with Corey podcast. Before I start for this week's topic and conversation, I wanted to give a big shout out to Pseudo and Jordan and Ernst and Ashley. If you guys haven't done so, definitely check out the videos that I posted on YouTube. At this point, there's two videos. There's a highlight video and then a shopping at Pseudo video. I've been talking to Jordan for a long time and wanting to do this. If you guys don't know, Pseudo in Somerville, New Jersey, it's a men's boutique. It is just absolutely amazing. It's where I get all of my suits from, all of my dress clothes, and then also just they have a great style there. So my personal style has 100% evolved and changed over the years of just establishing, the relationship over there, and just they're awesome guys. They have an awesome vision. They're able to, tailor everything based off of, your style, kind of what you're wanting to do, how you want to present yourself. So I've changed my entire wardrobe basically from, over the course of, a good amount of time, just from the first time that I got my first suit there compared to some of these other places that I went to. It was like night and day. So the second that I got that tailored suit and was able to, then when I took the next step to customize it, it was a no-brainer that everything slowly but surely shifted over. And I can probably say that 90% of my dressing, my dressier clothes within my closet are all from Pseudo. So, thank you to you guys. Jordan and I have been talking about this for a while, so I'm happy that we were able to kind of wait and do it at the right time. So there's a quick 1-minute video, and then there's about an 8-minute video on there. It's just kind of walking through, shopping a little bit, talking about fashion and how Jordan got, when he knew he had an eye for fashion. So thank you to you guys. Check that one out. I was going back and forth a little bit as far as what to discuss this week, because there's only so many variations pertaining to the real estate lawsuit and the settlement and the changes that are being implemented, and how many videos I can do on that, and how many reactions I can do based off of what's going on and how things have been changing. So I was looking at that topic, and I was trying to figure out, other things that I can kind of talk about that's related to the topic, but also just things that I'm reflecting on, because real estate has 100% been a little bit of a roller coaster this year. Not only the settlement, more so talking about the rates and talking about the inventory and the ups and downs and all of these things that have had a direct impact on the market and on the leverage for the buyers, the leverage for the sellers, and kind of just like what we're seeing. So there's a lot of adjustments, and there's a lot of kind of just stepping back and trying to assess what's going on and analyze what's going on, and then most importantly, reflect on what's going on. So what I've been doing is a little bit more on the reflecting side, because, with this settlement and with the changes pertaining to, there's a lot of changes, but pertaining to the buyer's agency and buyers who are working with buyer's agent to be able to represent them in purchasing a home. That's going to be, something that is taking a little bit of time to figure out and to coordinate with. And I would say that a lot of what I've seen has been able to adapt pretty quickly. But aside of that, though, it's still that conversation revolving around if a buyer is going to need to work with an agent. And then that's the kind of part of the conversation that I started to reflect on a little bit, because I thought about all of the buyers that I've worked with over the years and that I was fortunate enough to represent. And I tried to think a little bit about, what I do and how I operate that's different than, the agent down the street or whoever else it is. Because in my opinion, I'm not really in competition with some of these other agents that specialize in this area. If anything, I see them and I respect their business, and I respect the way that they conduct themselves, and I love working with them on the other side, whether they're representing the seller and I'm representing the buyer or vice versa. So there's a lot of respect there. It's not, and when I say there's not competition, I don't mean that, I'm looking at some of these things or the amount of homes that are sold or, the total close volume or the gross commission. I'm more so just meaning that I'm not in competition with them because the way that I conduct my business and 100% moving into the rest of this year and then changing over into 2025, that I'm going to be a lot more, I think, strict with this, is that I want people, and this is kind of like a no-brainer, like I want people that want to work with me and understand, more importantly, the value that I'm able to provide. Because this is not talking about anybody now but myself for probably the rest of this podcast now, but I started to reflect on the buyers that I've represented, and more importantly, the value that I was providing to them throughout the transaction. And it kind of got me to the point of thinking like, wow, like I understand what I'm able to give to them. I can't promise somebody a flawless transaction because there's a lot of elements within that transaction that are out of my control. But what I can promise is that I am going to do the absolute best that I can do to represent you in every area that I am supposed to be representing you, and putting your best interests forward and trying to make this as seamless and painless as possible. And I think that as I look back and as I reflect, I have a hard time of getting compliments or having people, say certain things to me that are kind of like boosting me up. But I needed to at least validate myself in the sense that I know that I do that. And I know that I do that with every single buyer that I work with, that I give 150%. I give as much as I possibly can. I'll go above and beyond. I will do anything that I possibly can do. And, hopefully the people that, have worked with me to purchase a home can validate that. But I think about that conversation and reflecting on that, and it brought it to this topic, which is just focusing on buyers. And I wanted to just tell a couple of quick stories on some of the buyers that I'm actually currently working with, and to kind of just express that value, because I can do the videos and I can be able to show the pinpoints, and I can be able to show you the list of the 200 plus things that a buyer's agent is supposed to be doing for a buyer. I can go over all that, or I can kind of talk about my own personal experiences that I've been having with some of these buyers. And I figured that, one of the ways to do that is to talk about a beginning, a middle, and an ending buyer. So basically a buyer that's just starting out with me, a buyer that's kind of right in the middle of the whole thing, and then, a buyer who is reaching the closing table for their deal. And starting off with the buyer in the beginning, I had this conversation, and I realized that I started to have this conversation over and over again. And I'm starting to understand more and more and learning within each transaction what these buyers are actually looking for. And I think to start it off, this particular buyer that I'm working with that just got started, we've only seen at this point, we've only seen about 3 properties together, but literally just made the contact probably about 2 weeks ago. I normally have a consultation. I try to get an idea and a feel. And I have this conversation where obviously everybody probably knows a realtor. Everyone probably knows somebody within this business that if they wanted to, they could reach out and they could ask a question, and I'm sure that they'd be more than willing to help them. But I also realize, as I said in the beginning, is that not everybody is going to feel, comfortable working with whoever it is. So what I've realized is that in these beginning conversations, and once they're able to open up a little bit, and then to be able to hear, okay, I know so-and-so, and whether it's a family member or a friend is in real estate, and they've already had a couple of conversations, and it sounds like they've already, and this is the more important thing, they've asked some crucial questions that were not able to be answered, I think, to make the buyers feel confident, not only in that person, but maybe even in this beginning process. Because the beginning of the search process, when it comes down to buying a home, is all about information. And it's about the person being able to relay that information to you the best that they possibly can. And the way that I look at it is that I just want to prepare you on the what's to come within this journey. Starting off in the beginning, typically the buyers that I'm working with, they have a they're very, very excited. They have a very high threshold of expectations, and they can't wait to get into some of these properties. And I'm all for it. I think that energy is fantastic, and it is very, very exciting. On my end, I kind of go through that and I bring up that excitement with it, and I let them know kind of what to expect. And I go through the whole, we're going to start off with the search, and then after that, as far as the properties that we're going to go and see, and kind of here is how that goes. So what I realize is that value that I'm providing to that buyer who's starting out in the beginning is that I am going to just answer every question that I possibly can, as honest as I can and as truthful, and I'm not going to mislead you in any way, shape, or form. And I'm also going to make sure that I spend as much time to where you feel comfortable in what's going on. You understand kind of what to expect next. You understand how quick that this process can be sometimes, but also the reality of how long this process can be sometimes. And I think that that's very, very important, because it's not even about optimism or being pessimistic. It's more so just about being realistic. And I try to do that, and I try to incorporate that in those first couple of conversations with buyers, just to be able to be realistic, because I don't want to set a high level of expectation even for myself, and then kind of let you guys down on something that I should have been a little bit more realistic with. So, looking at that, I 100% can see that the value that is provided is within that information, and it's within those conversations, and it's within developing what I think is probably the most important thing, is developing that relationship with the agent to the buyer. So even thinking about the idea of buyers, not wanting to be represented, that's totally fine, because I could probably tell you that at the end of the day, for the buyers that want to go that route and go from listing agent to listing agent or open house or whatever the case may be, probably would not have meshed with my style anyway, and it may have not been a perfect fit. When I first got into this business, I think that every single conversation that I had, my expectation was that it was going to lead to, a relationship, to lead to a sale, to lead to me helping out and helping out the family and the brothers and the cousins and everything. And I realized, okay, well, that's not a realistic expectation, because, and it's not even about not getting along, but it's just not being comfortable with who you're working with. And I try to always be very, very upfront with that this could be a 90-day process, and this could be a 3-year process. So what I try to really focus on is that, my goal is to obviously help you and assist in this purchase, but then also to be able to develop that relationship to become, and I don't want to sound corny when I say this, because I mean this from the bottom of my heart, but I don't really look at my clients after a certain point of us developing this relationship as clients. I look at them as, friends. We've developed a friendship and an understanding of what's going on. Now, on a more investment level, have I worked with investors that have been on a very, very, black and white basis, in the sense of, hey, this is what we expect. This is your job. We do this. Boom, boom, boom. Yes, I have. But in these situations, they're a little bit more intimate, in where you're getting to know somebody, you're understanding what they're looking for, you're understanding what they want to, the vision for where they want to be at for the next however many years of their life. And that's very, very not only exciting, but it's also very, very scary, because you're trying to think about what you're going to be doing, and something which is the most, the biggest purchase of most people's lives. And you're the person that needs to guide them and to be able to give them the right advice, and to make sure that they trust you as far as what it is that you're saying to them. So for my buyers that are in the beginning, I will tell all of you that conversation, that consultation, that just, do you click with this person? And for the most part, I think everybody can kind of feel that you have that feeling of like, oh wow, like I can 100% see this becoming like, a long-term relationship, rather than just like a quick thing to where I don't, want to speak to this person. So I would say that those consultations are always so important. Asking the important questions for you are always so important in the beginning. And more importantly is the person that you're working with, are they, from the beginning, are they giving you that value that you feel not only confident about them, but confident about going into, this journey of home ownership. So that's my recap for a buyer from the beginning. For a buyer that is in the middle of the process, and these last two are, they're fun because there's a little bit more meat to the sandwich, in the story, and just there's a lot more stuff that's kind of going on. So the buyers that are in the middle, at this point, you've established the relationship. You are hopefully confident and comfortable with the person that you're working with. And now here's the thing, from that develops something very, very special, and it develops an honest conversation at this point, and it develops a level of respect for each other, a level of understanding. It intensifies, maybe intensifies isn't a good word, but it increases that relationship to another level, because now there's a history there. We've seen 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 properties. We've put on offers to 5, 10, 15 properties. And unfortunately, I've had to call you guys to say, hey, we didn't get this one. With this one in particular, it was where not only did all of those things that I just say happen, but we also got to a point to where on 2 occasions that offers were accepted, and on the most extreme case, an offer was accepted, and it was a very, very exciting time for everybody. And then by the 3rd day or the 2nd day of attorney review, we had a cancellation letter with no reasoning attached to it, trying to figure out what was going on and speaking to the agent and all these things. Obviously, on the buying side, that is a terrible conversation to have. That is a terrible thing to happen. It is weighing in on your stress and on your overall morale of like what is going on, why did this happen, and is there going to even be a happy ending to this entire process that we're trying to do. On the agent side, speaking for myself, those conversations from letting a buyer know that the offer didn't get accepted to something to that case as far as like, hey, we got an offer accepted, congratulations, here's what we're going to do, we're getting to attorney review and just going through my whole process, to then say, hey, actually, they just canceled the contract and we don't really have a reason why, and we're trying to figure it out. And it's tough because I like to provide the information, and I like to be able to provide that in the sense of where there's no unanswered questions. And for something like that, there's obviously going to be unanswered questions. And I think that the important thing about the buyers that are in that middle area is that they need to trust the process, and they need to not only do that, but they need to trust the person that they're working with. So going back to that rapport and going back to the things that I want to do for my buyers is that I make sure the best way that I can that no matter if we're going up against 2 offers or we're going up against 200 offers, I'm going to do the best that I can with the terms that we are comfortable with as far as price point wise and the contract terms, to be able to present it to the agent so they understand where we're at, the strengths that there would be to work with us. And when I say us, what buyers need to realize is that when a seller's agent gets these offers, they're not, number one, they're considering the terms, and they're considering everything that's going to be the best thing for their sellers, but they're also looking at the offer in a whole as far as the agent that's going to be representing them. And like, is there a rapport there? Have they worked together? Is there, some sort of communication or whatever the case is? But I'm not saying that works out 90% of the time or 50% of the time. I'm just saying that in the cases of me presenting these offers, I make sure that I don't leave any boxes unchecked. And, the trust is obviously at a point where I'm hoping that my buyers at that point trust me fully to understand, listen, if I make these phone calls to you that we didn't get this offer, just know, and not that this makes it any better, but just know that we did everything that we could have possibly done. and they went with another offer. So does it suck? Yes, but there was really no other outcome unless we got into something that we were not 100% comfortable with, and we don't want to be there. So sticking with somebody through those hard times is very, very important. And again, this is just one of the stories with the buyers that I'm working with, because there's a ton that I can go back to that decided to, stick it out with me. And I really am always going to be grateful and appreciative of that. And, in this particular situation, it got to the point to where we were like, all right, we're going to, after that, it was a morale just kick to the gut. And it was, let's take a little bit of, not me, but, the buyers wanted to take a little break on the search process. I couldn't even blame them, because it went from the highest of high. It was one of those things where everything would have worked out for this one property, as far as the closing date based off of their lease situation, as far as the location wise, just everything lined up in a perfect unified line. And unfortunately, it fell through. So took a little bit of a break, but when the time was right, and I always look at that as almost like let me give you some space to kind of digest what just happened. Totally understand it. When the time was right, we reconnected, and we got to looking again, and we got off to a rocky start to where we had, I want to say, 3 more offers that were not accepted. One of which came back, and as if you're an agent and you're listening to this, you always love to hear, you can be the first backup offer. And it doesn't feel good. Has there been times where it's worked out in our favor, and we were the backup offer and then became, the offer and wound up closing? Absolutely. But agents know that normally that's not going to be the case. So, and also they know too that, reaching out to your buyers to let them know, hey, we didn't get chosen, but we are the first backup offer, doesn't really soften the blow at all to say, hey, we didn't get, our offer accepted. So, a couple of those happen, a couple more properties and open houses and private showings and comp searches. And, at that point, establishing that relationship to where I try to make it fun. I have to try to make it fun, because if not, if we're going to be, very kind of just like, I don't want, just if we're going to look at this not as a journey where there's going to be these things that happen, and then if we're not able to look back and just say, it is what it is. Let's move on to the next one, and then once we get to that next one, to be able to say, hey, obviously we know the process. We've been through this how many times now? So here's this, here's that. You add a little bit of that to it, just so it's just not as tense on every single showing or every single offer, where it's just like, because the undertone of it is obviously it is a little bit tense, because they want this. They've already have been rejected numerous times. So adding that element, adding that chemistry for my buyers and for my buyer's agent is always going to be important. And in this particular situation, we are now, knock on wood, we are now under contract with a property that is fantastic for them, worked out amazing. And, I don't want to go too much into this, because I don't want to just have this whole thing be me just patting myself on the back or anything, and hopefully that's not the way that it's being received. But I will say that for the things that I've mentioned before, as far as the way that I try to communicate on the selling side, to be able to really showcase the strengths of my buyers, I'll just say that formula and that setup and that dedication was, outside of price point and everything that's obviously provided by the buyer, was a factor that was 100% considered into getting their offer accepted. And I'm super, super grateful for that. I'm super grateful, for the other side, and just being able to have some of those conversations, because sometimes it's just very much just, hey, what's the number? What's the down payment? What's the loan type? What are the terms? And I understand that. I understand that approach as well too. And sometimes on certain sales, there's a lot more to it. So super happy for them getting into inspections and all that fun stuff. So at that point in the situation, you've developed that relationship, right? So beginning buyers, just building that relationship and that confidence and just that rapport with that person. Now you have that trust with that person in the middle. And then to end it off with the ones that are in the end phase, and this is a very, very special one, is just that the last leg of the race is almost bittersweet in certain situations because there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot that had gone on. There's a ton of things, and once you get towards the end of it, you kind of forget a little bit because you're so excited for your buyers that they're closing on this house that it was their dream, that you forget a little bit about that journey. And this one that I would share in particular is that you start off in that beginning phase and you start off developing that relationship and that rapport and building that trust. And then there's a point within it that I can't really put my finger on, and I can't say exactly when, but there's a point within that beginning conversation and consultation to before that middle phase that it changes over from, as I mentioned, from that client-based conversation to more of a friendship, advisor-based conversation. And you almost forget that it used to be like a client conversation way back. This one in particular was, I would say, years of conversations and communication and showings and open houses and different comp analysis and values and offers that were rejected and just anything and everything that you could imagine or think of in the last probably 2 years that have happened in the market, I experienced with these buyers. On top of that, I experienced not only one but two contracts that didn't just get our offer accepted, but we actually went under contract. And we didn't just go under contract, but we actually went through inspections. And if I'm not mistaken, for the one of them, we went through appraisals. And we went through this whole phase to where the first one, it was things out of our control. And that's always going to be the X factor in these situations, is what we can't control. And the first one, whatever, we tried to kind of just at some point just rush over that and to get into the phase, because you get to a point in some of these transactions to where, I don't want to speak for any buyers, but you almost don't even want the property anymore. If the conversations is going so, negatively, and there's so much stuff now to consider and things that we didn't even realize when we put the offer in and all these different elements to where it's very off-putting. So I understand that. So we wanted to kind of get back into the situation, which we did. We got to, that same routine of just sending out offers, getting rejections, unfortunately, to where we got another offer accepted. And then this one was amazing only because we got an offer accepted for a little bit under the asking price at the time. And the value of it was actually for the appraisal wise was way over what the contract price was. So there was a lot of joy within this one that just turned very, very sour, unfortunately. And that's the thing, at that point, I will always say, obviously, the buyers are the ones that are impacted the most on this. So, understand if you get an offer accepted, and I'm just saying this, out of whatever, and you go into inspections and something dramatic happens and drastic within inspections, it really does affect the buyer because, number one, they didn't know that going into it, and now it's like this weird thing as far as like, okay, well, how do we address it along with how do we, feel okay about it, and then what's the seller's going to say, and then once that conversation gets started, it can go one or two ways very, very quickly. And it also just, it just allows, I lost what I was saying, but it allows that relationship, it allows that trust to just continue to build and continue to build. And, the buyers obviously feel that, and on the representation side, when that, that rapport has been established and that friendship has been established, you feel it on the agent side too, because you wish there was something that you can do. You wish that there was a fix. You wish that there was an addendum that you can, whip up. You wish that there was something you can possibly do to make this situation better. And it becomes to a point of just accepting you can't. You can be there to advise, the buyers to have that conversation, to check in with them, to see what's going on. But, I can't control the attorney and the seller's attorney. I can't control everything on the lending side. I have to kind of stick to, what I know best. And trying to do that becomes difficult when the transaction gets difficult. So first one fell through. Second one took a very, very, very long time, and the buyers took an emotional beating for it to finally come to a conclusion where it fell through. Same thing as my middle buyer story. After that, it was like, hey, we need a little bit of a break, and I could not even agree with them anymore. I knew that they needed a break at that point. That's just kind of where things were at. And then, sure enough, once things started, same thing, back at it. And we get to the point now to where not only did they get an offer accepted, amazing house, the inspections all done, everything was agreed on with that, everything appraisal-wise, everything is set, and they're going to be closing in a few days. And that one and this one here with the buyers that are reaching towards that goal line, which is closing on the house, that's the real reason and the way that I got to where I'm at right now, to just kind of reflect on the buyers that I work with and reflect on the job that I do and reflect on the relationships that I've been able to build. And just to, not that I needed it, but just to be able to understand that, sure, the news and different places, depending on what you're reading, can say one thing and can say, oh, buyers agents are going to be a thing of the past and this and this. And the reality of it is that for the agents and a lot of the agents that I know as well too, is that they're very passionate about this. They're very, very passionate about the people that they work with, and they are grateful that they're able to work with these people and that these people are able to trust them. And, for these buyers that I'm talking about that are reaching the goal line, I typically send out, I always send out an email along with a video, along with a kind of step-by-step on what to expect on the day of closing. And in doing that, I typically kind of reflect a little bit upon the journey that we had. And this one in particular, just because of the length and just because of all of the hurdles and all the times that, they were knocked down and all of the, I laugh, but all of the negative phone calls that I already had, a pit in my stomach, having to call them up with this news, knowing that it was about to, ruin their day. All of the times that happened, to be able to get to where we're at right now. And that made me remember that all of that is worth it. The effort that's put in, the relationships that I've been so fortunate to be able to establish in this business and with these people that are able to trust me. The time just educating buyers and the time communicating and having these conversations and making them feel comfortable, making them feel confident. Just all of that pays off, not obviously, not just financially. All of it pays off at the end of this journey, because it's like these people that were once clients that had a conversation, that were trying to get to know me and trying to figure out what they wanted. I was there every step of the way to get them to this point, which is what their dream has been for, whether it's 6 months, whether it's a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is. We have gotten to that point, and that's a very, very, very rewarding feeling. And I think that the only way that feeling is even granted is for there to be some care on the representation. Meaning, obviously, I care about everybody that I work with, and I want to see them, enjoy what these buyers that I'm talking about right now are enjoying. Is that, wow, we did all of this. We got through all this adversity. We stuck together through this entire process, and we are here, and it paid off, and I'm super excited, and I'm super happy, and I couldn't be happier for them. And it's an amazing feeling, and it's almost like it's almost a feeling that it is tough to really put into words because, there's a lot that goes into it. At the end of the day, this is my job. This is what these people are not necessarily hiring me, but what they are, using me to do is to represent them on the purchase of their home. But that's why looking at it from that perspective is very difficult. And especially when you start to have the conversation where it's like, oh, they're going to be, you don't need to use them anymore. And there's no real need for them. And hearing it from a lot of different agents and hearing it from different people within the industry or just people's opinions for that matter, is tough because I look at it and I'm like, well, no, I know at least for myself that there is 100% reason why I'm going to continue not only doing the things that I've been doing, but also leveling up a little bit from this year into next year as far as the way that I am doing business and the way that I am, not a change in representing these buyers, but just making sure from the beginning that connection is there, that they understand where I'm at, that they, can almost have like a sigh of relief when they get off the phone to be like, wow, I feel like this guy's got it and we're going to be in good hands. So I say all that just to say that last point is that, I want the people that I work with to want to work with me, to want to know that they're in good hands, to want to know that they're working with someone that cares about their needs, that cares about their best interests, and is going to do everything that they possibly can to, not only meet their expectations, but hopefully to be able to exceed them. So I'll end this off with just saying, reflecting on that and thinking over the course of this past month, because there's been so much information and so many changes, and you got to do these forms now, and you got to have these buyers sign these contracts, and you got to, so as all of this changes, there was a point where I had to ask myself, like, is it worth it? Is this what is going on? Just a lot of questioning. And I'm happy that I came to the conclusion that it 100% is worth it because of the feeling that I can feel going into the end of this week, which was something that I can look at and say, I did that. Obviously, it's a team effort, but, I did the best that I could for these people to get them into this home that is perfect for them. It's their dream home. They love it. And that's going to be my guiding light, going towards the end of this year after all these changes and into next year. So if you made it through this whole thing, I really appreciate it. I know some of that in there, as I said before, I have a difficult time kind of not only accepting compliments, but then also being able to I don't want to say brag, but just to say the things that I receive and the feedback and stuff that I receive, especially if it's positive. So a lot of reflecting this month. And as we go into September, and as we go into eventually the fall market, I feel like that I'm in a better headspace as far as what these changes have happened. So I'll leave this off with to say, buyers, number one, first and foremost, and most importantly, every buyer that I've worked with and I'm working with, and whether it's the first consultation or it's to where these buyers that are closing. This week, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. Just know that I'm always going to do the best that I possibly can. And for any buyers, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, just, understand that a buyer representation is somebody who is going to professionally be that person to guide you throughout this transaction. And as I just laid out, there's a lot that goes into a transaction, a lot. And I'm not going to go through the whole list, but you can imagine that there's a lot of these things. There's a lot of ups and downs to navigate. There's a lot of questions that are going to come up, and you're going to want to have somebody that you trust to be able to ask those questions to. So just all things to consider. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys for checking this out. I'm happy that I did this. I was kind of on a right in the middle of, do I do this or do I not do this, or should I even talk about this stuff? But I'm happy that I did it because as I was even doing it, I was reflecting even more on all of these times like that I've worked with all these amazing people. So again, thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for listening. As always, subscribe, check out those videos on YouTube. As I mentioned, this one's going to be an audio only. So if you listen to last week's episode of the Shopping at DeSudo, it is going to make much more sense if you go onto YouTube and watch the video of it, because then you'll be able to see everything that we're talking about. So make sure you go and check that out. Subscribe, like, comment, do all that good stuff. I appreciate it. Going to continue making some good content. Going to continue talking about some topics as they come up. Going to continue having guests on throughout the rest of this year into next year, and just build this community that, even though at times I feel like anything, you question decisions and you question where things are at, but I'm happy that I have spent such a large amount of my time and energy within this business and within these people that I've made these connections with, because that payoff, and as I said, not just financially wise, because obviously there's a financial element to it, but the payoff to be able to establish these relationships and these lifelong connections, and to be able to get these people to succeed in these dreams and goals that they've had, whether it was for, like I said, 15 years or whether they just started thinking about it. So I'm happy. I'm happy with the payoff, and I'm happy where things are at, and I'm excited. I'm excited for the rest of this year, and I'm excited for just implementing a couple of little tweaks into my model. So thank you guys. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. I don't know when this is going to come out, but weekend, whatever it is, and we will keep on doing what we're doing. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. I will talk to you soon.